Bueno, pues bienvenido a este vídeo donde vamos a ir a una entrevista de nuevo especial. ¿A quién vamos a ver hoy?
Vamos a ver a Jay Abrams, o sea, ni más ni menos.
Exactamente, así que acompáñanos, porque si no conoces a Jay Abrams deberías, por lo menos si te gusta algo el marketing. Es una persona que muchísimos de los expertos ahora que hablan de marketing han aprendido acerca de él. Y tú sabes lo que cuesta la hora con Jay Abrams. O sea, si alguien quiere realizar una consultoría con Jay Abrams, él cobra aproximadamente, ¿te acuerdas?
Menos de $5.000 no cobra, de ahí para arriba.
Y vamos a estar aproximadamente pues una media hora de entrevista con él, así que vas a recibir un valor por lo menos de $2.500 y estamos seguros que los consejos que nos va a dar te van a ayudar en tu negocio, en tu proyecto, en tu idea. Así que nos vamos.
Vamos a verle.
Te sigo. De nuevo, como te hemos dicho, Jay es el hombre de los $2 billones porque ha ayudado a miles de empresarios, de empresas en diferentes industrias, subindustrias, a vender sus productos, sus servicios. Así que esta entrevista no tiene ningún desperdicio. Vas a aprovechar 30 minutos del conocimiento de este hombre. Nos vamos para allá.
Bueno, ya hemos llegado al lugar donde nos vamos a encontrar con Jay Abrams, así que acompáñame. Bienvenidos una vez más a la revista Marketing Táctico y Estratégico. Como siempre es un placer estar con vosotros y queremos además, como siempre, traeros a los mejores profesionales. A los mejores profesionales que llevan además una larga trayectoria y que han conseguido resultados extraordinarios. Hoy estamos con una persona muy especial. Es una persona que ha ayudado a más de 10.000 clientes en más de 400 industrias. Sus clientes han estado dispuestos a pagarles miles e incluso cientos de miles de dólares por sus consultorías y por ayudarles a conseguir objetivos y resultados espléndidos. Estamos hoy con Jay Abrams. Jay, thank you very much for it's a pleasure.
To be here.
Thank you very much, Jay.
My pleasure, both of you.
For your time and for this interview.
That's my honor.
I'm sorry for my English. I speak Spanglish.
That's fine.
So
See, I don't speak good Spanish, so it goes both ways.
Okay,
Right,
perfect.
so just ask away. I'm ready.
Great.
Yeah, great. Thank you very much for this opportunity. It's a pleasure. So we want to begin with a first question for you. I go first in Spanish. So the first question is que queremos hacerle una pregunta ahora especial a Jay y es como sus clientes han estado dispuestos a pagarle miles, incluso cientos de miles de dólares por sus consultorías. La pregunta es, ¿qué es lo que te hace especial, Jay, o diferente para que alguien pague esas cantidades que tú haces por una empresa? ¿Qué es lo que tú haces por una empresa?
Yeah, Alfonso mentioned, so I'm going to translate.
No problem.
You help so many companies, 10,000 clients that you have in over 400 industries.
Right.
And I know that those companies are happy to pay you thousands, even hundreds of thousands of dollars to consult with you because you add so much value to them. So the question that comes to my mind is actually, what makes you worth that much money and what can you do for a company?
Well, I'm going to answer you with humility. I don't know if I'm worth it or not. You have to decide that yourself. But most people who spend a lifetime in one industry, all you know is the way that industry thinks, operates, markets. When you get the benefit that I've had of looking at almost 500 industries, not companies, industries, you see a spectrum of magnificently different ways to reach a market, magnificently powerful ways to attract a market, magnificently powerful ways to convert prospects to buyers. You see so many different ways to go at it that it gives you the ability to help a company that is competing in a market where everyone does the same thing the same way. And you can give them monumental advantage because you can borrow success thinking from all kinds of other, I just waved away the waiter, all kinds of other industries. So I bring to people the ability to think well beyond what all their competitors do, the ability to experience well beyond what they would normally experience, the ability to create hybrids, which are combinations of the most powerful strategies, the most powerful business models, the most powerful marketing, the most powerful selling approaches, the most powerful positionings, and in the process, elevate them to a place that is so far above their competitors that they have no viable competition. If competing in an arena where you don't have any competition is worthwhile, I have a lot of value. If competing the same way everybody else competes is what you want to do, I have no value.
Correct.
Sort of depends on what you want. Does that make sense?
That makes total sense.
Okay.
Y por traducir un poquito, que le preguntamos, bueno, ¿por qué las empresas te pagarían miles o cientos de miles de dólares por consultoría contigo? Y es cómo él consigue que vayan más allá de sus negocios, cómo crear sistemas, cómo crear procesos de venta que puedan maximizar los resultados, cómo ellos pueden crear todo un compendio, una estructura en su empresa que les separa por completo de la competencia, ¿no? Eso es precisamente lo que Jay menciona y lo que él hace por las empresas, ¿no? Vamos con la segunda pregunta.
Una segunda pregunta, Jay, es que igual que un doctor pues presta atención a los síntomas de una persona, los analiza para sacar las mejores conclusiones y de esta forma hacer un diagnóstico, cuando tú analizas una empresa, la pregunta es ¿qué síntomas tienes tú en cuenta al ver esa empresa y cuál es la peor enfermedad que has encontrado tú en una empresa?
I like that question because as a doctor also looks for the symptoms of a patient.
Right.
And then when he sees those symptoms, then he can come to a better conclusion and give a good treatment for that patient. When you analyze a business, what symptoms are you looking for in order to improve that business, and what's the worst disease that business can have?
That's a good question. So when I work with a business, there's a number of very predictable things we do. The first is we break the business into two parts. What they're doing now versus what they should be doing. Because they're doing something right now that is generating their revenue. Maybe dumb, maybe smart. We look at what they're doing and then we break apart, because I've been privileged to be able to look at all the impact or leverage points in a situation. There may be 25 impact points. How you target your market, what your proposition is, what you try to do to start a relationship, how you try to convert that relationship to an initial sale, how you convert an initial sale to either a higher sale or a repeat sale. We look at everything that's going on and we evaluate and very carefully measure the performance. We look at what you are doing compared to what you could be doing. I teach something called highest and best use theory. It means you only have the same amount of time, same amount of effort, same amount of resources, same amount of opportunities, same amount of market. How you use them is what determines whether you produce this result, or that result. So the first thing we try to do is see, do you have a strategy? If so, what is your strategy? Are you being tactical? Do you have a position? If so, what is your position? How are you expressing it? Do you have a viable marketing approach and system to target your audience and convert it? If not, why not? We look at every element and then we prioritize it, because each company is going to usually be stronger or weaker in different areas. So I look at what you're doing, what you're not doing, how what you're doing is working, why in the world you're doing it. We spend hours just trying to understand what got your business to where it's at now. We don't judge whether it's good or bad. First thing is, what in the world are you doing? How are you doing it? Why are you doing it? How is what you're doing performing? Then we systematically and pragmatically say, okay, that doesn't make sense, let's replace that. Or that makes sort of sense, let's fix that. For example, people will come to me all the time and say, I have a website. I'm getting 40,000 visitors and I'm converting 0.5%. I want to get 80,000 visitors. And I'll say, that's dumber than dumb. Let's try to get 3% instead of 0.5%. Let's try to get half the people to buy a larger unit of sale. Let's try to get them to come back and buy other things. Let's figure what else we can do that you don't right now sell, whether it's your product or service or some, and we look at how to better maximize or optimize what you're doing. But I have a reference that borrows from almost 500 different industries. So when I look at something, I'm not looking at what you're doing, I'm looking at what you're not doing. I'm not looking at how it's doing, I'm looking at how it could be doing. I'm not looking at what you are saying, I'm looking at what you could or should be saying. I'm not looking at the conversion process you're using, I'm looking at what you could be using. And then we list all the things that not are wrong, but where you are underperforming. We call it sub-optimizing. If you could be doing this in 25 different areas, but you're doing this, we look at all the areas you could be doing and we pick what's the first most important, the second, the third. We're very pragmatic. We prioritize and we knock off the most important thing first that's going to throw off for you the most additional profit, so it will fund your ability to do all the other things. Does that make sense?
That makes total sense.
Okay.
And in that process that you go through with a company, what's the worst disease that is there a pattern that many companies?
Well, yeah, there's my life has been lived in an arena which was focused on where do you get higher and better performance from everything you do. And you break it into activities. There are 4 primary levers or impact points that most people are guilty of. They are tactical, not strategic. So if they have no strategy, you try to get them a strategy, because if you change from tactical to strategic, it'll normally go from that to that. Their marketing sucks. I don't know if sucks says the same thing in Spanish, but it's...
we'll use a word that brings up that that term, yeah.
So the marketing normally is very poor. You try to make the marketing better. Their innovation is poor, and innovation is not technology as much as it is what's the value proposition that they are offering the market that exceeds and is superior to the competition. Finally, they don't manage their time, they don't manage their opportunity costs, they don't manage their message, they don't manage their access to the market, they don't manage their capital or their people well, and so we try to look at that. Then we look at all kinds of things. Do they know how to sell in a consultative way? Do they know all the better ways to reach the market? Because most people, I mean, it's dumb. If you wanted to reach, you talked about doctors. If I wanted to reach doctors, but I ran an ad in a newspaper where 1 out of every 20,000 readers was a doctor, that's pretty inefficient.
Yeah.
A lot easier ways to reach doctors. Then we ask, who already has a direct access to the market we want? How can we partner with them? How can we collaborate? I mean, we have a lot of processes we use, but it starts with very strategic, very pragmatic, very critical thinking. And we assume most companies are not very strategic. We assume most companies are underperforming their potential. We assume that most companies are operating the way that literally all their competitors operate. And what we try to do is introduce more powerful, more profitable, more performance certain ways of replacing what they do, because everybody's got the same 24 hours, the same 7 days. Most people in small businesses, they don't have a lot of capital, so they have to use their access, their message, their distribution channels, their positioning advantage much more effective. Right. So we work on all those. Does that make sense?
That makes sense. So you think about leverage, yeah? So
everything is leverage.
Everything is leverage, right? So maybe people think, well, what's tactical, what's strategic? Maybe tactical is just put an ad on, and strategic is what's that ad going to bring you at the end? Is that a way?
Sort of. A bigger way of saying the strategy is the big overriding game plan you're playing long term. Tactics are nothing more than the activities you use to deliver on that game plan. If you run an ad in a newspaper, that's a tactic.
Yeah.
If that ad in the newspaper is designed to produce a quality prospect that converts to a first-time buyer, and then that first-time buyer gets converted to a repeat buyer, and that repeat buyer gets elevated to a larger ticket buyer, and that larger ticket buyer gets elevated to an even larger ticket buyer. And when you have nothing else to sell that person, you have other people's products and services that you offer. That's a strategy.
Yeah, exactly. That's totally different than what most people think about marketing.
Most people are just doing things to make money for the moment.
Yeah.
And they're static. They're very, they're not, the things they do are not designed to keep moving forward, and they don't have a big vision of what they're trying to do. Their goal is to make some money. And that's usually the goal of all the people they're competing against. So you have great advantage if you can step back and say, whoa, that's a very limited way of thinking.
Yeah.
A much higher performing way is, okay, what's my strategy? My strategy is I'm going to use every cost-effective way I can to reach my market most directly. I'm going to get my market to start a relationship. I'm going to have a system to convert that beginning relationship to a first-time buyer. I'm going to have a system to move that first-time buyer to either a repeat buyer or a higher product service buyer. I'm going to have systems that keep moving them up the food chain. When I have nothing else to sell because I've sunk so much cost, I'm going to have other products or services to sell them. I'm going to have access to all kinds of other companies, other product and service providers who already have a relationship with my market, and I'm going to partner with them. And it's a much more elevated way of thinking.
Totally. Esto lo vais a tener luego traducido simultáneamente por la extensión, pero podemos pasar a la siguiente pregunta.
Desde luego que sí. ¿Podrías, Jake, compartir algún ejemplo de alguna empresa con la que trabajaste alguna vez que no estaba rindiendo al máximo y qué hiciste para darle un giro a esa empresa para conseguir los resultados positivos?
Jake, could you tell us about what business or what market that business was in that was not performing at its true potential, and what did you do in order to produce them results? Could you give us a concrete example?
Sure. I'll give you a lot of examples. I'll give you an old one from here. I'll give you a cool one from Australia. I'll give you a neat one from China.
Great.
And I'll give you one from Japan. So in the United States, I had an investment client that was running ads in financial newsletters, and newspapers, Wall Street Journal, Forbes, looking for investor clients. We stopped that and we said, who already has a trusted relationship with investors? And the answer were investment advisory newsletters, investment seminar providers, publishers of investment books, people who sold investment software. So we went to all of those people and we made them partners to secure for us clients, and we built a $2 billion business by shifting our focus away from general media to people who already had access to our market. In Australia, I had an entry-level home builder. That means they built homes for first-time buyers. They were running ads in newspapers, but 98% of the readers of the newspapers were not good buyers. They were other people. So we said, and they were spending about $15,000 per sale because it was costing them a lot to get a prospect, convert them, because the majority of people in the newspaper were not their ideal prospect. Right. So we're wasting most of their money on people that weren't. So we said, who has your ideal prospect? And there were two markets. One were the high-end apartments that had the successful young people, and when they got married, they would either stay there temporarily, get married and want to move, or get married and have children and want to move. So we went to all the apartments that had waiting lists because they were that desirable, and we were spending $15,000 a sale in newspapers. We went to the apartments and we said, we'll give you $5,000 for every one of your residents that you send a letter to telling them they can go move into our homes, and we'll give them a package advantage. But every time you lose somebody, if you can't replace them quickly, we will pay the lost rental for up to 6 months. but they had a waiting list, so they really didn't have any problem filling the apartments. And we ended up getting millions and millions of dollars of direct buyers, but our acquisition cost of a sale went from 15,000 down to 6. I went to China, and we had a candy company that sold candy. And in China, unlike, I don't know what it's like in Spain, but in China, the candy is not sold big in stores. They're candy stores. There's 20,000 candy stores. And this was one of about 20 candy product manufacturers. And up until they met us, their whole proposition was sell our candy instead of his. But there was no reason why. And we gave them a reason why. We said, go to the candy company and tell them that anybody can ask you to buy their candy instead of somebody else's. We want to grow your candy business for you because we know if we grow your candy business for you, then our business will automatically grow, and hopefully you'll appreciate us enough, you'll give us more of your business. And they did, and they ended up selling $500 million of candy a year, and they ended up selling out to Hershey's because they were so successful. But what we try to do is think differently than anybody else. We try to look at the problem and ask, first of all, who already has access to the market you're trying to reach? Or what value, what benefit, what advantage is no one else bringing to the market that if you were the only one that brought it, you would stand out and you would distinguish yourself above and beyond everyone else. And we look at how can you reach your market more credibly? Who already has credibility that if you are associated with them, then you automatically have credibility? Who already has spent the money and the time and can give you direct access to a market that you're trying to reach in the cold outside world?
Yeah.
I don't know if that makes sense or not.
Totally.
Yeah.
That's the way most business owners don't even think about it, because they made a business because they know there's a market need for that business, but they're not marketing consultants, they don't think strategically. So that's why you implement all these strategies for them, because they don't come with those ideas.
Yeah. Well, like in Japan we have a large driving school. And getting your license in Japan is really interesting. Half the people that get the license never use it. It's basically a badge of honor. You just have a license.
Paper.
Half the people that use their license don't buy a car. They just rent cars on the holidays or the weekends. So we were trying to distinguish our client from everyone else, and we did two things. One, everyone else was saying, we've got driving school lessons and they're $3,000. We said, not only do we have driving school lessons, but when you buy our lessons for $3,000, we will give you 4 weekends worth of free rentals for a rental car. And because we realized that half of our students never bought a car, they just rented cars forever on the weekends, we ended up putting rental car agencies in our driving schools so that we could make money forever off the students renting them cars.
Right.
So it's a different way of thinking.
Totally.
Does that make sense?
Totally. So si alguien nos está escuchando y viendo y está escuchando lo que Jay está mencionando, aunque no hable precisamente a una industria concreta, puedes entender cuáles son los procesos mentales a seguir para poder dominar en tu mercado. I was saying that maybe somebody is not identifying with the markets you're talking about, but if they understand the thinking process, the way you structure those systems, they can apply that in any business, because your strategies can be applied in
very universal. I mean, a universal principles. What you have to realize is there's always going to be somebody who's already got credibility. There's always going to be something very valuable that no one else sees that you could add to your proposition that makes you not a commodity, but makes you proprietary. There's always going to be a way to reach the market more directly than the general way all your competitors do it. There's always going to be some positioning advantage that no one else sees. If you can harness any or all of those, the combined advantage it gives you is profound, and that's how companies go like that.
They grow exponentially.
That is correct.
Vamos a hacer una pregunta más. Con la experiencia que tienes, Jay, de trabajar con tantos empresarios, con hombres también de negocios, ¿dónde crees que está la prioridad? Es decir, ¿está en cambiar su marketing o en cambiar su forma de pensar?
With your experiences with so many businesses that you work with, what do you think is a priority? Change the marketing or change the way they think, the mindset?
Well, you can't really change the marketing until you first change your mindset.
Okay, so that's first thing.
Most people don't see marketing as, I mean, there's a quote, Peter Drucker, who's a famous, he's deceased, but he was one of the greatest business minds that ever lived. He said that marketing and innovation are the only two things that generate a client and thus revenue. Everything else is an expense. If you're in business, you're a marketer. And you can't really be a great marketer until you change your mindset and realize that what marketing really is the ability to bring to a market the understanding of needs they're trying to fill or goals they're trying to achieve, and the awareness that your company or your product or your service provides the solution or the achievement or the protection, depending whether you're selling a solution or a realization of a goal, better than anyone else, and your ability to express it directly more powerfully. And marketing is nothing more than education. It's educating the market to recognize they have a problem they're trying to solve. It's verbalizing that problem better than anybody else. It's showing them you understand their situation better than anybody else. It is demonstrating that you have a solution to the problem or a strategy to achieve the opportunity that is better than anyone else, and showing them how and that you can do it for them, you have done it for others, and having them entrust you better than anyone else. And all of those are marketing. You get trust from association with people who have trust. You get the attention of the market by being able to express their needs better than anybody else, and that requires you to understand them better than anyone else. A marketer is an educator. A marketer is a problem solver. A marketer is somebody who knows how to put into words what people are desiring. We use an example. If you go to a hardware store to buy a drill, you really don't want a drill, you want a hole. And you may not even want a hole, you might want to fasten something. So try to understand what's the real ultimate goal that the product or service is fulfilling, because that's what I try to do. I try to get people to start and say, what's the problem that the product or service is solving, or what is the opportunity you're making possible? And because in the world today, there's a lot of options. We use an example. You could be selling a pill that I take to lose weight. So you're competing with everybody else who sells pills. You're competing with people who sell equipment. You're competing with health clubs. You're competing with videos and books. You're competing with personal trainers. You're competing with, if you're really fat, with bariatric surgeons who are going to cut out your stomach, or balloons they're going to tie around your stomach. You're competing against inertia and ambivalence, which are people who are not going to do anything. And if you don't understand everybody you're competing against, you can't be very competitive, can you? So we try to be very, it's a little more sophisticated than that. But we try to really understand the world we're dealing with. We try to understand the world better, and more importantly, the prospective buyer better, and we try to appreciate them better, respect them better, and serve them better, and know what they want that they may never have even recognized they want. And I'm getting a little bit sophisticated. I don't know if this makes sense.
It makes sense, because then the sales, the revenue, the income, it's inevitable that it comes.
Well, pardon me. We teach a concept called preeminence. And preeminence, in its simplest term, is to operate at the highest pinnacle of excellence and greatness. It's to be seen as the only meaningful choice that somebody can make. The only person or the only company or the only product that really grasps what they're trying to do and serves their need in the most complete way. And when you get to that point, it's liberating because you're not competing against anybody.
Yeah.
You're in your own world, and that may sound very sort of surreal or fantasy-like, but it really isn't. But it starts by realizing you're a marketer. It starts by realizing you are a strategist. It starts by realizing you are a strategic marketer. It starts by realizing that all of marketing is adding value to people's lives, that the people that add the most value win as long as that value is relevant and appreciated by the market. So you got to know what your market values, and you have to have a keen definition of what value means to your market. It gets a little complicated, but it's interesting.
Definitely. It remembers me a saying that also a friend of us mentions, Diego Rodriguez. He says, if you get to the point when all your marketing, your strategic marketing is done so well that at the end the consumer says in their mind, I would need to be an absolute fool not to buy from you, independent of what price you're going to charge me, then you really get customers. You really got value to the market, and then everything changes.
And I would agree, but I would go one step further. You go to the point where they don't even have that recognition. It is just so fluid and automatic that they just take the action. They don't even have to think about it. It's just so self-evident that they go ahead and take the action. They don't equivocate. They don't contemplate. They don't procrastinate. It's just so evident that they're moved instantly to acting. And if you can get to that point, and it isn't as difficult as it sounds, but most people are intimidated by marketing. They think it's an art, and marketing is really a science. And as a science, it's like photography or glass making, or we're in a restaurant, food preparation. Some people are better than others, but it's a learned skill.
Yeah.
You can learn how to be a strategic, preeminent marketer. You can learn how to be a very, very superior value creator. But you can't do it until you understand the elements that are, I mean, I always say that there are factors, forces, elements that impact the outcome of anything you do in business, in life. If you don't know what they are, you can't control them. So if you don't control them, you're being controlled by them. So the first thing, and it's a longer discussion than we have time for tonight, but if you can identify all the forces, the factors, the elements, and the impact points that are affecting your market, then you can control them. If you don't know what they are, you can't control them. So I always try to start in saying, okay, what are we dealing with in your market? What are we dealing with your product? What are we dealing with in what you do and who you do it for? And how is your competitor dealing with it right now so that we can add more value to them? It's all about the value you add, but the value has to be recognized, appreciated, desired immediately, and desired only from you, meaning whoever's watching this, because the market sees you as the only entity, the only product, service, company that can produce for them what it is they now realize they want, because you put it into words. And it's pretty exciting. When you understand it, it's an enormously empowering capability, and that's how companies can multiply really, really rapidly, because they finally understand the game they're playing, and the competition doesn't.
There's time, I think, for one more question.
You're fine.
Última pregunta.
Sí. Una pregunta que sería interesante, la última es, ¿qué preguntas debería hacerse cualquier emprendedor o empresario constantemente?
What question must an entrepreneur, business owner, make themselves constantly?
So the question that you need to ask is twofold. It's in my business niche, whatever I'm doing, because you could be selling high-end, low-end, consumers, wealthy. How am or can I be superior in my accessing the market, in my value proposition, in my strategy, and in my performance? Because if you don't ask those questions, you can't answer them. If you can't answer them, then you can't do it. But most people in business do the same thing the same way everybody else does. And then they're surprised because they get the same result. So if you want a superior result, you have to question what you're doing now, how you're doing it now, how it is doing, meaning how it's performing, and what you can do different. And you can't do that unless you understand intimately what your competition is doing right and wrong, where their gaps are, how you can either outperform them or over service them or out access reaching them. And all those are very doable things, but it's not one question. I don't know if that helps.
Yeah, it helps because many people now understand their own market, and with those 4 elements, everybody can answer what they need to ask themselves in order to dominate in a marketplace. So,
Yes.
Makes sense, makes sense. Jay, it was a real pleasure for us to come from Spain, be here with you in this interview, and I know you haven't been to Spain yet, but we wanted to bring something from Spain for you.
Great.
So we bring a little bit Spain to you.
All right.
Some things that Spain is well known about, and I know that you like wine.
I love wine.
You like red wine.
I love
brought
it.
you this nice bottle of red wine.
Oh, that's great.
So
Thank you.
maybe you can enjoy with your family or whatever. And something totally different. This is gold. It's liquid gold. That means it's olive oil.
Oh, wow.
Cold pressed olive oil from Spain.
Oh, wow.
Natural. And this is something you don't get in the US, so we thought, okay, maybe.
Well,
you can
my wife
enjoy
will love this. She's a
and-
cook and she'll love it.
Great.
It's very gracious. You two are doing a very commendable job, and I think what you're trying to do for the entrepreneurs in your country is admirable, and I think that you should keep doing it and realize this. When somebody commits to a business, it's a lifetime commitment. They owe it to themselves and they owe it to their market to be the best marketers, the best strategists, the best value creators, and the best contributors of really of value to the market they can be. And you don't do it just by hoping or wishing. You do it by understanding your market and their weaknesses, their desires better than anyone else. Thank you all. I appreciate it.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you.
Thank you very much.
You're very gracious.
Esperamos que les haya gustado la entrevista con Jay Abraham. Es un placer. Esperamos que pronto las cosas que él pueda enseñar también estén disponibles en español. Lo hablaremos con él. Así que nada, ha sido un placer estar con él y esperemos que hayáis disfrutado. Si tenéis la posibilidad de dejar vuestros comentarios justo debajo de este vídeo, por favor, hacerlo.
Ponerlo porque es indispensable. ¿Entendéis por qué los consejos de este hombre son indispensables? Por eso se le conoce como el hombre de los 2 billones de dólares, porque lo que dice realmente tiene totalmente sentido y funciona. Así que poner debajo los comentarios porque seguramente nos gustaría saber vuestra opinión.
Hasta la próxima. Chao.
Thank you. Bye.
Bien, ¿qué os ha parecido la entrevista? ¿Verdad que no tiene desperdicio? Ya os lo decíamos que iba a ser increíble. Los consejos que ha dado este hombre sabemos que funcionan, los que le seguís también sabéis que funciona, de hecho por eso ha facturado más de 2 billones de dólares, así que...
De hecho son principios universales, que si tú te preguntas, bueno, pero es que mi negocio es diferente, no, tu negocio no es diferente. Tú estás en el negocio de hacer marketing, si no haces marketing no vas a conseguir ventas, si no consigues ventas no consigues beneficio, no consigues facturar, por lo tanto tienes que esforzarte en conseguir hacer el marketing de una forma estratégica.
Además, de hecho, fijaros que esto no implica si eres una empresa pequeñita, si acabas de empezar, si no acabas de empezar o si llevas ya una trayectoria y eres un empresario de mucho tiempo, eso no importa. Estos principios lo que se saben es que funcionan y ayudan a conseguir los objetivos que uno se marque o incluso objetivos que ni siquiera uno piensa que puede lograr. Así que si os ha gustado, os queremos hacer una pregunta, es decir, ¿os gustaría también que toda esta información de Jay Abraham
porque le llevamos siguiendo tiempo, y llevamos estudiando todo su conocimiento, todo lo que él sabe durante muchísimos años y hemos aprendido mucho.
Exacto, entonces, debido a eso, ¿os gustaría tener contenido, es decir, formación de Jay Abraham para vosotros? ¿Os gustaría tener una compilación de esto? una parte fundamental para poder aplicarla en vuestro negocio. Si os gustaría tenerlo, hacer una cosa, ponernos debajo en los comentarios si os gustaría realmente tener este tipo de formación de Jay Abraham. Decídnoslo, estamos encantados de que nos lo digáis y nos deis vuestra opinión.
Porque de su conocimiento hemos creado un sistema que sabemos que funciona. Además, él nos conoce, sabe que esto realmente tiene mucho potencial. Así que nada, si es algo que te gustaría que hiciéramos, de compilar toda esa información en un sistema que tú puedes replicar en tu negocio, dínoslo, deja tus comentarios y nos encantará responderte y saber tu respuesta. Nos vemos en los siguientes vídeos. Chao.